Hi guys from Canada. I definitely point out some misconceptions about their compressor, some issues with their preamplifier quality. I'm gonna explain quality of their converters and in what circumstances it will be absolutely useless purchase. Definitely this video will be subjective personal opinion, but this opinion will be based on extensive tests versus each other, versus their main competitor Focusrite, and even comparing Volt audio interface with other Universal Audio product, Apollo audio interfaces. I want to tell you in advance, I'm a big fan of Universal Audio. I have two 1176s, LA2A, 610 tube preamplifier, Apollo audio interface. My honest, subjective opinion on this audio interface without any promotions for it. By the way, guys, the cool thing is you can attend one free trial class of one of the most powerful audio production courses. You will be connected to a real class with my students who are taking this course right now, so you can see exactly how we study to decide. It's 9 months, online, crafted system, monthly payments. Hundreds of students graduated from this course over the last 8 years. As a bonus, this course has unique one-row check-in sessions where I open your real projects in front of you in real time. I compare them to the best sounding mixes of all time. And I don't just comment, I check your settings, I show you mistakes and how to make decisions. The information about me, my course, and more than 200 reviews you can find in the first pinned comment or in the description. But instead of reading, I offer you to get a free trial class, because nobody knows better than you what works for you. And just ask for the course details in email. How to contact me, the information is in the first pinned comment or in the description or on the screen. So how about compressor? First of all, I want to show you how Universal Audio confuses us with their specs. Totally different specs in the manual and in specification of this device. Official websites from Universal Audio, vocal preset, and they say 2 milliseconds attack. If you don't know, 1176 compressor is known for very short attack. Based on the manual, 1176 compressor roughly 1 millisecond, actually even 800 microseconds. This compressor gives you 2 milliseconds instead of 1. 2 milliseconds, 1 millisecond, it doesn't make too much difference actually in many cases. On real 1176 it would be the longest attack available, and on a guitar preset it also gives you 1.5 milliseconds. So basically it would be also like the longest attack on real 1176. But look what they say in the manual. In the vocal preset they say it's a fast attack. But fast attack? Look, it's even worse than that. Guitar, for Universal Audio guys who wrote these manuals and specifications, 1.5 milliseconds is slow attack, and vocal 2 milliseconds is for some reason fast attack. How 2 milliseconds can be fast attack and 1.5 milliseconds can be slow attack? Next confusing moment over here, a release for the vocal preset 300 milliseconds. On 1176, release goes from 50 milliseconds, the fastest, to something around 1 second, the slowest. So 300 milliseconds would be somewhere in the middle. But in the manual they say slow release. Okay, let's say it's a slow release. Next preset called guitar has 700 milliseconds, more than 2 times slower. But in the manual it says quick release. Quick release. 700 for them, it's quick release. And 300, it's a slow release. Fast mode has 35 milliseconds release. Real 1176, based on specification, have 50 milliseconds release, but due to tolerance, I could agree it could be, who knows, 35 milliseconds. But the manual says fast mode has medium release. 300 milliseconds slow, 700 milliseconds quick, and 35 milliseconds is medium. 30 microseconds is 0.03 millisecond. It's super fast, it's just impressively fast. Then they call 1.5 slow attack, and 2 milliseconds they call fast. Confusion over here is here. 700 is definitely not quick, and 35 is definitely not medium. 2 milliseconds, at least for 1176, it's not fast at all. It actually could be even longer than maximum, at least based on real 1176 specification. 1.5 milliseconds is slow, maybe it's correct in terms of 1176. And 0.03, that's correct. Out of the 6 lines of specification, Universal Audio made a mistake in 4 out of 6. Another pretty confusing thing, it's a ratio of this 1176 compressor. Real 1176 has 4:1, 8:1, 12:1, 20:1, and all to 1. This one has 6:1. I'm absolutely not against a different ratio, why not? But If it's really 1176, who knows? The settings which Universal Audio chose actually pretty don't work for me. In many circumstances, I really need personal control over attack time and release time. Over the last 20 years, I just basically test day and night. I'm one of those psychos, you know what I mean? For example, for these comparisons, 300 takes, I specifically used many different microphones. I used the second U87, just imagine how crazy it is, because they definitely don't sound exactly the same, they have tolerance. So I even compared these things. Very important part of real 1176 is their transformers. They really color in a unique way. Of course, these compressors don't have the same huge transformers, which you can find in those 1176s which are behind my head. Nice idea to have analog compressor in the audio interface. For psychos like me, who for example knows that if you work, let's say in 44K, and your plugins don't have anti-aliasing filter, and most of them don't have, you're gonna have aliasing. This compressor is analog, which means it doesn't create aliasing. You're gonna have a bit different tone from this in comparison to plugins, especially if you work in low sample rates. I would prefer not to call them 1176 first of all, and secondly, I would prefer to have some attack time, release time control, and I would like to have some ability to see how I control amount of compression. Or here you just simply need to crank up more and more gain, and the more and more compression you get with it. So to get noticeable amount of compression, you actually have to crank up preamplifiers pretty high, and output levels will be pretty significant after recording. You should understand how your psychological kind of reaction to it should be. You the guy who bought it, and if somebody say there is something wrong with this, you're not gonna like it. So sorry for that, I don't want to offend you, but I definitely should tell you. When I went to the music store, a guy who works over there said they actually have different converters. And I didn't believe him. I said, wait a second, I checked their website, they're not supposed to be sounding different, exactly the same specs. But he said he tested it, and maybe it's just tolerance, who knows, but I took these two audio interfaces at home, and I extensively tested them side by side in different blind tests. Definitely this one gives a bit more details. Maybe it's just tolerance, because in audio equipment there is always tolerance. This is bestseller on the market. Focusrite Solo, they almost identical price between these two. I would say monitoring with this audio interface is more pleasant. Focusrite Solo has maybe a bit too much coloration. This one has better monitoring, but again, in my opinion, if you're after like higher spec converters and like more detalization in what you hear, number one, it's Apollo among these four audio interfaces. Higher spec not always means better. But again, I want to tell you, better specs, it doesn't make you better mixer, it doesn't make you better producer. Of course, you should invest at least in some audio interface, but no point to pay $5,000 for the audio interface when everything else is pretty not handled yet. When you already have very proper mixing skills, monitors and headphones, acoustic treatment in your studio properly put, not those like myths about acoustic treatment, but real acoustic treatment, then I would say it's time maybe to improve converters and specifications on your audio interface. If you just started, let's say, if you already have this audio interface, no point to spend another $150 on this one. You know, it doesn't make too much difference for you if you switch from this to this. The same if you switch to this, or even to this, another audio interface with just a bit better specs. It will not help you too much. Very cool thing about these audio interfaces is this design and feel and these kind of wooden pieces on the sides. I mean, I'm impressed. And this one is by far the best looking audio interface for me. One also important thing to point out is pretty bright LEDs over there. In a dark room, I have to cover it somehow. By the way, don't forget to check first pinned comment. If you want to try a free trial class, you will be connected to my students who are taking my course right now, so you can see exactly how we study, so you can decide and understand how huge value you can get from this course. Other than this, my main studio, I want the second studio, very kind of simple place. Why I decided not to go with Volt audio interfaces. It was a preamplifier. So what's wrong with this preamplifier for me? I don't mean it's bad and impossible to use. You can record songs with this, no problem. What I'm gonna say right now, it will be very subjective, but I hope you will appreciate it. So what I'm saying over here, you don't have this liquid sound. Liquid means you go like, and this one more like, you know, like sorrow throat. Another associative example which you can imagine, you take a piece of paper, do crazy stuff with piece of paper, making this kind of a paper noise, you know, like sound like this. And something like that, those like micro details in some overtones I hear with this preamplifier. I don't have this kind of sound neither in Focusrite or Apollo. I don't have this sound in my analog preamplifiers at all. I repeat one more time, it's very subjective, it's just for me, you know, what I'm saying is just for me. It could be totally different for you, you can be happy with this and you're gonna say, yeah, it's the best preamp for me, it's totally fine. All walls have this 610 universal audio emulation, it's called vintage button over here. I have it, it's over there behind my head, black one, called 610. It's a tube device. Of course, it would be probably cool to play something. The problem with that, it will be waste of our time, because the way how my voice works with my particular microphone and how it interacts with its preamplifier, it would be totally different from your voice with your microphones and the same preamplifier, with your acoustics. But instead, I'm gonna give you much more than just playing some sample, you know what I mean? This one is basically this preamplifier with its own tone, and above it, you just put this one. Let's be honest, I kind of not interested in hating it and I'm not interested in promoting it. I just honestly have this preamplifier behind my head and I would be happy if this one sounds exactly identical to that one. I would happy to return a couple of $1,000s back from that device. I would pay for this $140 or how much it costs right now, and I would be happy with this. I actually like its preamplifier much more on its own than this one with this vintage button on. I totally understand if you don't mix well, and let's say your mix is like really muddy, you hit this button, you make everything like brighter, more detailed, and you may say, oh, actually it makes it much better. The problem is, when it's already engaged, it takes my EQs, my compressors and everything not that well actually. When it's more like raw recording just from preamp, I have much more room, much more maneuver to make my mix sound right, you know what I mean? This one make it more difficult actually. This preamplifier also has the same principle. They have this Focusrite Air mode, which kind of make everything like brighter and bitier and seems like it gives you just much more transparent sound in comparison to just preamp itself. And again, these like specific bite and specific boosts in some particular frequencies, not always what you really want from raw recording. So you again sometimes actually prefer not to use it and you just use preamp itself. But I totally understand why people like Air mode, because it instantly gives you more transparency, more detailization and definition of, let's say, vocals in the mix. The main question is, should you buy it? I would say, if you have absolutely no audio interface and you're just beginner and getting into audio world, yes, you should. You should buy some of audio interfaces. Probably if you just record vocals only, just go with solo audio interface, let's say like this one. Actually, you still can buy Focusrite. I would go with this one for preamp, but I would go with this one for monitoring. It's pretty expensive thing for audio interface which contains compressor which not necessarily you need, for preamplifier which doesn't sound the best. If you can pay as much, I would say pay a bit more and get Apollo. If you already have this one, no point to go to this one. Absolutely no point, in my opinion. Going to Apollo, majority of emulations on Apollo didn't work for me, but I found a couple of... It has its own disadvantages, it's very overheating. Going to Apollo only if you already have absolutely perfect set of speakers, great headphones, amazing acoustic setup in the studio. You control standing waves. You don't believe in nonsense which commonly people say about acoustics. On my course, by the way, we have very advanced and amazing studio setup topic. If you have no audio interface at all and you're really on a tough budget, don't overpay. Go with just at least some audio interface. This one has huge value. This one has huge value. For this price, it's a huge value. Even though it's not the best preamp, not the best converters and everything, you're gonna be working with audio with this absolutely okay. By the way, guys, I remind you that you can get one free trial class of one of the most powerful audio production courses. You will be connected to a real class with my students who are taking this course right now, so you can view exactly how we study to the side. Plus, my policy is to put only 10% of the power of my course in my videos. Of course, 90% I keep for my students, where I'm not just share with you like different random mixing techniques, but it's very crafted system where I train your ability to hear, ability to make decisions, I train your reactions and audio engineering vision. How to contact me, the information is in the first pinned comment or in the description or on the screen.